But I want to start with a rather, you'd call it a strange question, maybe asking why are you asking that question, but nevertheless I'll ask. Let me ask, how many of us here are parents? You have a child, you have children. Okay, let's see you, wave your hand like you care. All right. The rest of us, I assume you fall in the other category. Not children. I don't need to ask you to raise your hand. But I have to ask, if you had a baby, what part of their body would you like to resemble yours? Why are you laughing? And why? This is the question of what and why. So turn to your neighbor and tell them, what part would you want to resemble yours and why? If you already have children, babies that have been born this year in Makuno Mashariki, if you are part of us and you are able to, you were blessed with a baby this year and you're here, where are you at? Just raise your hand wherever you are. We want to appreciate that. If you were blessed with a baby this year, just raise your hand wherever you are. Wow, let's, the professor himself, let's clap. Let's appreciate. Wow. Only this year, wanaume mlikuwa mkifanya nini? Only last year mlikuwa mnalalia masikio. Acheni. Or you're saying I should lead by example. And then when the baby shows up and you know, everybody's taking turns to take care of the baby. Visitors have come to carry the baby. I don't know what happens. We change. We begin to swoon and we talk silly baby talk. And I'm sure those babies look at us and they're like, and what is this guy trying to say? Let me play ball. Say something meaningful that will help my life. Okay. I tell you, but the most fascinating thing about children showing up, or babies being born, is how people are so interested. Everyone is so interested on who they look like. When they show up, you see all these mothers, they're like, "Yo mugunika baba yake." Huyo nikaa wewe kabisa. Huyo hawezi hapa. You know. But there's fascination about how they look like. And it's all about identity. Some of us decided to become rugby fans last weekend, in as much as you do not know anything about rugby, because the Kenyan rugby team seems to be doing good, and you switched from supporting handball to rugby. So many handball people that can move to rugby. And you know, Arsenal fans are not very proud of identifying with Arsenal this weekend. But identity is big. And any rejection on the basis of identity is painful, it's hurtful, it's deep. And it's worse when it is on the basis of sexual identity or preference. As some others would put it, orientation. And any rejection on the basis of identity is painful, it's hurtful, it's deep. And it's worse when it is on the basis of sexual identity or preference. As some others would put it, orientation. And this question of sexual orientation is shrouded in mystery, suspicion, and conflict. And largely because our sexual activities are personal, intensely personal. And we all tense up sometimes when somebody of a different sexual orientation or inclination comes into our space. We tense up. And if there's anyone around who we suspect, we don't even want to ask them, because we may ask them and they may say, yes, I am thinking. And you go like, what do I do next? And you're worried, maybe after they have identified themselves, they say, oh, you also are. So you're afraid. And we don't talk about it. And because of this, it becomes a source of serious conflict. And even when we talk about it, it's what would be the best word? It's acrimonious. People want to fight because there are those of us who push the envelope and we become rude and uncourteous. We feel we are right and others are wrong. And on both divides, there are those who feel, if you're of a different orientation, get out of my sight. And there are those of us who are saying, you're rejecting me because of a different orientation. And there is throwing of words. Sometimes it degenerates to, regrettably, things like violence, even death in some countries. Anti-gay protests have been violent. And gay parades have turned violent. One thing I can guarantee all of us is I'm going to try and be as open and honest with us as possible as we talk about this. But I want to take us back to our standard of truth in Mavuno Mashariki, which is the scripture. I want to direct our attention to Genesis chapter 1, and we'll read from verse 26. Allow me to suggest right there that the whole issue of sexual preference, sexual orientation, and sexual inclination is an identity issue. It's an identity issue. And unless we recognize it as an identity issue, then we may not be able to address it in the right way, even as a church. It's an identity. It's a quest for some identity. Allow me to approach the scripture with a bias. And my bias is that our identity, first and foremost, before any other thing identifies us, our identity, first of all, is in God. Somebody say, my ID is in God. We are all God's look-alikes. Allow me to cut. Help me to cut piece from the cloth. Guess what color it will be when I pull it out? That was not supposed to happen. Look at that. Let me ask us. The fact that this thing has turned blue, does it mean that it is not yellow? At the core of this blue cloth is some yellow. Before we even begin to point fingers about our sexual preferences, let's ask ourselves, have we sorted out our spiritual identity? And let me tell you, if I were you, I would stop making a big issue about running and trying to define myself by my sexual identity and begin to ask myself, could there be another identity that I need to sort out? And I want to talk to those of us who could be having a struggle. Maybe you are gay, maybe you are lesbian, and you want to identify, you're fighting for that, you're saying, this is my identity. I want to beg you, could there be a struggle within you? In as much as you've defined yourself that, could there be a struggle within you about your identity? In as much as you've already identified yourself as a homosexual, could there be a struggle within you that you need to address? And I want to suggest that probably that struggle is a struggle about your spiritual identity. And maybe you may need to first of all sort out that before you begin to make a big issue about your sexual identity. And so my conversation with us today is to call us to a place of asking ourselves deep questions about that part of us that needs to look like God. Is it really looking like God? Are we working on it? Are you working on it? And I tell you, when we sort out that part, then we can sort out every other part in our lives. Then our sexual identity and all these other